Thanks everyone for being here. We got a full room. Maybe I'll start with a land acknowledgement while we're waiting, so people don't have to lean this far into the microphone. Just want to recognize that Halifax is situated in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. And this morning we will be hearing presentations from Debbie Kramer on building bridges and how to coordinate an informed response. Do you want to wait to see until we get the... Sure. Oh, that's okay. You good to go? Yeah. Okay.
I talk way louder than you, Jasmine.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Debbie Kramers, and I work for Housing Stability Services in the City of London. I am the Coordinated Informed Response Manager, CIR Manager. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Attawandaron. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in their territory, and are equally grateful to be welcomed to speak in the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. Coordinated Informed Response, or CIR, started as a pilot project back in 2019 after the city experienced an increase in city-involved activities related to unsheltered homelessness. The city was experiencing a high volume of complaints and service requests that didn't seem to fit in any one service area for a response. Housing Stability Services, then Homeless Prevention, teamed up with municipal law enforcement bylaw and worked on a collaboration to create a response team for service requests that involved our unsheltered community. This collaboration led to a very successful pilot project, excuse me, where we were able to take away great learnings, which then ultimately led to coordinated informed response, becoming part of the multi-year budget for the next 4 years, and now we will be a regular funded response as of next year. Oh, sorry. Okay, I don't know, it's not working. Where's our tech guy? Sorry.
Yeah, because that didn't work.
It didn't work.
You have to start the... Oh, there it did.
Okay. The City of London has a population of 425,000 and has 490 parks, so we truly are the forest city. Like most Canadian cities, London is concurrently suffering from a housing crisis, a drug poisoning crisis, and a mental health crisis, all resulting in a huge increase in homelessness, causing it to be its own crisis. And as we all know, homelessness isn't the problem, it's the result of all these other problems. London's by name list went from peaking at approximately 900 in 2019, which was pre-COVID, to skyrocketing to over 2,300 in 2023 post-COVID. Approximately a third of that number lives unsheltered. In 2019, around 200 unsheltered individuals, and then in 2023, we are now seeing 600 plus. Our current shelter system hosts a total of 345 beds, which, by the way, are always occupied. There are barriers to our shelters, as well as most don't permit partners, pets, and some of them don't permit substance use. So our by name list, 2,300, shelter beds, 345, unsheltered homeless, 600 plus. With the increase in unsheltered homelessness, there too came an increase in unpredictable, disruptive, and sometimes violent behaviors in our community. There was a definite need for a coordinated, collaborative approach that reduced the need to call police for every single situation. A response was needed that both understood and supported our homeless populations while supporting our residential and business communities. Civic Administration recommended a pilot program with a coordinated approach that would use existing city departments, contract outside support agencies, and collaborate with various existing emergency services. Council approved the pilot project using municipal funds. Various departments contributed to the pilot program from their existing complements, and a request for proposal went out for our outside agency outreach team. This was done under our procurement process. Coordinated informed response was created to bridge the gap between unsheltered homelessness and community services. This included addressing calls from community with concerns that would historically go to police regarding unsheltered homelessness. CIR offered a caring and compassionate approach to enforcement, which included supports and promoted the safety of all Londoners, including those of us living unsheltered. We have both urban and rural encampments. Our urban encampments and rough sleeping are mostly in parking lots, vacant buildings, and doorways, generally located within the core of the city. Our rural encampments, for the most part, are in our parks and along the river. CIR, therefore, needed to be citywide. During the pilot project, most of our unsheltered individuals slept rough in the core of the city. This is where all community services are located in the City of London. For the onset, CIR was moving people along by asking them to relocate to more appropriate places and offering in-the-moment supports when needed. After some growing pains, many learnings, and an abundance of success, the pilot project was approved to be added to the multi-year budget for the next 4-year term. Coordinated informed response became a dedicated city program rather than just off the sides of the desks of many departments. It was our first city frontline team to help address and support unsheltered homelessness. Through our experiences on the pilot project, we were able to develop a well-thought-out team, processes, and principles that would best suit our community needs. Build a better, safer, and more supportive community, collaborate with professionals and agencies in the field, learn from everyone, but especially from those actually living unsheltered, always use a compassionate approach, reduce harm, avoid adding to the trauma already being experienced, assess, reassess, course correct, and grow. Our coordinated and informed response team is a trained, highly engaged team of City of London employees, contracted outreach, and London Police Services who are all on the street every single day offering support and service to Londoners living unsheltered in our city. The team consists of Housing Stability Services, where the leadership sits. That includes a manager, an operations supervisor, a housing program coordinator, and an admin assistant. It includes 8 municipal law enforcement officers, or MLEOs, dedicated solely to the CR team, maintain a compassionate approach to enforcement, well beyond their bylaw training and enforcement training. They have mental health training, Indigenous cultural safety training, first aid and naloxone training, system navigation training, hoarding training, and extensive health and safety training, and the list goes on. Also on our team, we have 4 dedicated roads operations crew and an operations supervisor who do all the physical cleanups from encampments and sleeping rough. They clean our roadways, our sidewalks, and all city-owned property, and they clean private property with permission, but I'll get into that later. They manage all of our garbage, debris, and needles. Corporate security is on our team. They enforce trespass on city property, so our team does not have to. And where necessary, they do night patrols out in patrol cars. Service London takes all service requests, inputs them into our CRM, and creates the queue for service calls every day, all day, so our team can stay up to point for our incoming calls. Our coordinated informed response outreach team is 24/7. We do stand down now from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. where they go in office to do work, casework, and reports. And they have an encampment team, a casework team, and a crisis team. London Police Services offer support through their foot patrol and their core unit. They always patrol the core and the downtown, but they attend encampments upon our request only when we need them. What do we do? In 2022, advocates and civic administration came together for an all-of-community approach to solving homelessness. Through these discussions, it was determined that people shouldn't be displaced anymore and should be permitted to have encampments within community as a human right, since there is no availability currently in our shelter system. Before this happening, individuals were not permitted to have encampments in our city parks. We never disencamped individuals, but rather sought compliance through relationship building, consistent messaging, and supportive alternatives. Currently, however, with set parameters of safety, which I will also discuss later, individuals are being allowed to encamp in our parks, provided they are on city property. We currently have 97 encampments in our parks, all of which can be up to 6 tents each. The CIR team does both proactive and reactive responding. They proactively monitor known encampments, our depots, no-fly zones, business storefronts, and all of our hot spots. They reactively respond to service requests. The City of London receives approximately 40 service requests a day regarding unsheltered homelessness. Complainants either enter them into our online portal or they get taken by Service London and entered into CRM. CRM generates a queue for our team, which they have access to their whole shift, which they monitor all day long. Because we have so many encampments in our park system, we have set up service depots to cater to the basic needs of the individuals residing there. We have 4 service depots in the City of London. They consist of a porta potty, which obviously stays, and a table that gets set up by a team of workers for 1.5 hours every single day, 365 days a year at lunchtime. Individuals are served a hot lunch, a bagged dinner, and a bagged breakfast with Hygiene products, safe gear, socks, clothing, blankets, etc. are also available to individuals at these depots. We use HIFIS for our people information sharing and CRM for encampment sharing. CRM, which is Customer Relationship Management, is a great tool for collecting our data. This is the first year of CIR taking from CRM, which then generates into Power BI for pretty much anything we want. The dots are all the encampments. The date can be flexed. You can receive at any time or change that at any time, whatever window you want to find out. It will list the locations of all of the encampments because we use GI mapping. And then there's a running count at the bottom. For example, this Power BI displays that in our first year of pilot, we had 3,819 encampments. We can break it down into various different parameters using the CRM. In this case, when counselors want to know how busy it is in their particular ward, we can do that for them. This is a window of everything since CIR has started. And it's, I don't know if you know, Councillor McAllister, which one's your ward? But this just gives you a heat map of where you're seeing encampments in the City of London. Since inception, 15,376 encampments. Power BI also permits us to compare data, which is really useful for us to see trends. In the first pilot month on the left, you will see majority of encampments occurred right in the core of our city, mostly on Dundas Street, which is our main arterial road. And then this month, you will see they have spread out throughout the city because we are now permitting encampments in parks and along the river. We adapted a safety toolkit because we now permit encampments, or I shouldn't say permit, but we don't disrupt or disencamp encampments. We support and offer wraparound services, providing they are safe and healthy. We created this toolkit that we provide all of our outreach, our bylaw team, anyone that is engaging in the encampments, at the depots, et cetera. We make an agreement with those that are encamping, and we set some safety perimeters. These perimeters are non-negotiable. Human trafficking. If we have someone human trafficking, obviously we report it and they are asked to leave the encampment. Violence and threats, brandishing weapons, not possessing or owning a weapon, but brandishing a weapon to staff or another encamper. Pets need to be leashed or muzzled if they have a muzzle order. No open fires. We run a garbage program. We deliver garbage bags to all of our encampments. We designate their garbage pickup space. We pick up all of their garbage. We provide sharp bins so that they can discard all of their sharps safely and maintain their encampments for a safe, healthy environment. Underage individuals, non-negotiable. Camp capacity, every encampment is permitted up to 6 tents. If it gets anything above that, they have to reduce it, figure out what they're doing. Not all tents, obviously, are occupied by people. Often people keep tents, extra tents for their belongings, so sometimes that creeps up to be extra. And then location of camp. It cannot be near a playground, a pathway, open area of play, on a floodplain, on a riverbank, on a roadway, on private property, on a sidewalk, or in a bus shelter. We also will not permit it near a school ground or a daycare. We do have some, what I referred to as no-fly zones earlier, where we have established certain parks in our city where we do not permit any encampments, and that is because of their high volume. They're mostly in the core. It's where the city has most events and festivities and festivals, and it would be far too disruptive for the people who are camping. We have a trespass authorization program. I just got my 5-minute warning, so I'm going to talk really fast. Trespass authorization program. This permits the CIR and police to attend a private property. We enter into a written agreement with private property owners. Often it's businesses, but sometimes it's residences that see reoccurring encampments happen on their property. This gives us the permission when a service request comes in, we can enter onto the property on the permission of the owner and deal with and support the encampment that exists there and then clean up the mess that has been left behind. This has been really helpful for our BIAs and our businesses. It has also been helpful for residents who live very close that don't have definite barriers between the parks and their property. So it has assisted us with engaging with folks and being able to move them along off the private property. Community impact, sorry, I'm gonna fly through these now. We have a very supportive team. Everyone knows everybody by name out there. That it goes both ways. All of our unsheltered folk also know the names of all the staff. They've built relationships, grown some very good trust. They're very reasonable even when enforcing. We have a wraparound outreach team that engages with everyone, does all the paperwork needed. Everyone out there is pretty much paper ready, just waiting for that housing. And we really have seen an uptake. Initially, it wasn't so great, but as we've been building and growing and people know who we are and what we are, and we're not cops walking in, it's been really, really good. Of course, there's always a need for continuous growth. Our numbers keep increasing on the streets, so we keep working with our housing stability services and everything else. Okay, now I'm really powering through. The City of London has engaged our health and all of our supportive agencies to what we call a whole of community response. I'm going to skip all of that, but CIR is a big part of it in that it supports the depots, and we are strongly at the encampment strategy table in the whole of community response. We are creating hubs. Depots are different than hubs, but we are working, coming up with any plan we possibly can to solve homelessness in our city. Of course, we have our challenges. There is a strong NIMBYism in the City of London, and there is still the perception that police are going to take out everyone in encampments. So we work with that challenge all of the time. Coordinated informed response on a whole has been a very positive impact on the City of London. It certainly has changed the lens on unsheltered homelessness. That is literally everything we do. Under Housing Stability Services, CIR, our entire portfolio is unsheltered homelessness. So it lets us concentrate, support, and have advancement in what we need to do for our folks. And I'm Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie. You're good. It was 20 minutes exactly, almost.
Watching your warning.
So our next presenters are going to be presenting on creating a continuum of community integration, collaboration, and practice. So we have Holly Ferris from the City of Chilliwack and Jody Higgs from Pacific Community Resource Society.
How do I get back to this?
Okay.
It's up there, but it's not on my screen.
Double click your actual thing.
But it's up there. I might need help.
If you go,
Someone
yep.
else? Just mess with it in the background, try and get you going. Yeah, that's great. We do.
So, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. So my name's Holly Ferris. I'm the manager of social development with the City of Chilliwack. And this is Jody Higgs, who's the manager of housing, substance use,
An Indigenous program.
and
right?
Indigenous programming from PCRS. And we just like to acknowledge that we are honored to live, work, and play on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Stolo Coast Salish peoples in Chilliwack.
See, it's
And
coming up there, but not. That's okay.
we're going to talk to you about creating a continuum of community integration, collaboration, and practice in Chilliwack.
Do we need our tech guy?
Thanks.
It's weird, eh?
I'll go get him. Okay. No, she'll go. I broke it.
Happened yesterday too, apparently.
Oh, great.
They're not sure what the solution is, though.
It's coming up on there, but it's not coming up on.
Right.
Yeah, like if you click on
And not
PowerPoint.
coming
you'll
in
see
presentation mode.
This one?
No, it's this one, but it won't.
Probably because there's still another one open.
Okay.
It's still running another presentation. So sorry.
So
it's
close that one. Oh,
That one,
that's
yep.
one.
This one.
Yeah.
And you can close mine.
That's. There you go. Okay. Yeah. If there's another presentation running, it might run another one next to the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're back in business. Okay, now I just need to get the slide going here. Oh. Okay, so Chilliwack, we are located about an hour east of Vancouver in the Fraser Valley, nestled in the mountains. Our population's about 102,000 people. The average home costs over $1 million. $1 million. $1 million. And the average rent for a one-bedroom is $1,300. We had a major housing boom last summer, which sent the price of rentals over the top. Like, I don't think when I moved there 2 years ago that housing was $1 million for a home. And that created homes that were affordable, $1,800 for a family. They were being sold, and now the upstairs is being rented and the downstairs is being rented, and really making our housing market unaffordable now.
Are you talking about this one? So Chilliwack has the good fortune of really being surrounded by our First Nations communities, and we're actually surrounded by 10 First Nations communities, and they're really woven into the fabric of our community and our city. So 10% of our 102,000 people identify as having Indigenous heritage. However, over 47% of our community experiencing homelessness identify as Indigenous. So you can see the disproportionate levels there. So here's some vulnerable population stats, many of which are taken out of our point-in-time count. So we've seen a 35% increase in our homelessness population since our 2020 count, where we now have 413 individuals experiencing homelessness as of March 2023. Just in terms of some of those stats, 60% are male, 40% are female. 70% have been experiencing homelessness for longer than 1 year, which tells us that 30% are fairly new to homelessness and a direct result of our housing crisis. And then again, 47, almost 50% of those folks identifying are Indigenous heritage. That's Bobby on the right. So we're going to kind of walk you through really our continuum that we've created in Chilliwack to try to help deal with the situation at hand. So we're going to go through 5 of our sort of programs or structures that we've set up on this continuum in order to hopefully make some impact, which we are seeing.
So the community response team started about 15 years ago, and it is a team of RCMP, security, and bylaw, and they walk around every morning between 7 and 7:30, the downtown core, and wake people up and ask them to collect their belongings and sort of move along if they're blocking businesses. So through this, it was identified that there were no services opening at that time, and there was no way to connect individuals experiencing homelessness with services. So they would come across individuals that were in need of help at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're trying to call people, no one's at work yet. And it was created a lot of barriers. People aren't able to access the services, and then they're told to go find the service, which is a big barrier and hurdle for a lot of people. So through this, the community integration team, the need for that was found, and Jody's going to talk about that in a minute, but it was to provide outreach with the community response team. So now there's a team of 4 to 5 people that go out every morning, and they talk to people. They let them know about the services. They now case manage individuals and make sure that they have the help that they need. There's also the Wellness Center now too. So the community response team leadership is a key stakeholder in various community tables, including the situation table. They're also coming along to our shop talk table. And I had mentioned it was RCMP bylaw, Griffin Security, and now the PCRS outreach team. So we have in this picture, we have our RCMP officer, our 2 outreach workers, Christine and Crystal, and one of the Griffin security guards.
During COVID with their masks on. So like Holly mentioned, they had recognized this gap in terms of the foot patrol and coming alongside that team. But I'd also kind of over those last few years recognized a couple other gaps in our community too. One was that there was a lot of outreach, but nobody was really managing those folks. So everyone had eyes on, everybody knew them. Yes, we'd given them food, we'd given them harm reduction. There was all these pieces, but nobody was really moving them along to their next steps. So we felt that this was probably a solution for that as well. The other thing is that I coordinate our situation table, which I'll talk to in a second. But I also didn't see it working and functioning like it should, mostly because it was off the side of everyone's desk. Some of you may belong to situation tables. And then the lead agencies, there just wasn't the accountability and the follow-through that we were hoping to see within sort of that week following referrals coming to the table. So we came up with this idea of community integration and coordination, where we had 2 full-time staff. It was a pilot that started. It was Reaching Home funded through the city of Chilliwack. And so their purpose, like Holly mentioned, is to come alongside our community response team during their foot walk or foot patrols. But it's also to sit at the situation table, and it's also to case manage our most vulnerable folks out there and be able to, not just to the referrals coming from the situation table, but referrals that were coming from RCMP or the other community response team members from other agencies. So this program actually expanded last year. So we're now 7 days a week. It was just Monday to Friday to start. We saw such success with it that we did increase to weekends. So there's now 2 part-time staff on the weekends as well. They operate 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And really their mandate is that rapid and integrative response for individuals with elevated risks, often related to substance use, complex mental health, and their homelessness. Like Holly mentioned, they walk around with the foot patrol at 7 a.m. and at 1 p.m. And then they're also on call for the CRT or the Downtown Business Association, other businesses in the community to provide a little bit more rapid response during those operating hours. And so more than just outreach, like I said, these folks are case managed to provide and coordinate services, look for referrals, advocate for new supports and resources. And in the past 2 years of operation, they've case managed about 70 individuals in our community. Like I mentioned, this team's directly connected to our situation table to be able to support, integrate that rapid response within that 24 to 48 hour period. That we also have a vehicle, so they're able to provide safe transportation to those appointments, to detox, treatment, shelter, their probation, court, really anything that they're needing. And then, although outside of the mandate or our expectations with this program, this team actually developed some landlord relationships over this past period, and they had actually secured housing for about 13 of our folks in the rental market. Mostly congregate housing and bringing folks together. This is not without its challenges. I do say you might want to plan those things out before going ahead with it. Steve's laughing. It definitely requires the support of housing supports. We all know that, right? We can't just house people and then sort of leave and expect that that's going to work out. So we are always seeking more money for support for staff specifically to maintaining and retaining their housing. I think I'm next. Like I mentioned, I coordinate our situation table. How many people in the room are part of a situation table in their communities? Quite a few on that side. So we have a really active table. We were one of the first cities in BC to start the situation table, probably going back about 7 years ago now. And there was only 5 or 6 situation tables in BC, and there's 39, I think, as of last week. So it's grown rapidly over the past few years. We have really good buy-in in our community, and the commitment is definitely a priority for folks. We meet every single Tuesday at 1 p.m. And then individuals are referred, if you're not familiar with the situation table model, individuals are referred when risks extend beyond the scope of one single agency's capacity, and also where there's imminent risk involved, so that's the acutely elevated risk factor. When those referrals come forward to the table and vote, it's anonymous referral, a vote is made at the table, and then confidentiality is waived. And so the folks at the table share the name and the birth date. All of the folks at the CERT table are generally, we have a few outreach frontline, but mostly they're managers or director level. And we all have our laptops with us, and you go into your system, and then there's a coordinated, there's a coordinated team of folks who are already involved, and also an identification of where the gaps are, so that you can invite those missing agencies to the team. So then there's a filter 3 and filter 4 team, and really within a 24 to 48 hour time period, you're expected to intervene in some way or wrap around those individuals. And it really depends on what the needs of that individual is, how that looks. There's usually 5 to 8 agencies that are involved with that filter 4 team. And like I said, everyone's at that table. We have all of our health authority and our social services, Ministry of Children and Families, probation, all the social services are there. Colleen's going to talk about Shop Talk.
So in BC, we are a little bit behind on coordinated access and HIFIS. I think anyone from BC knows that. So we've come up with our own sort of coordinated access type table. We call it Shop Talk. We meet every 2 weeks, and it is frontline workers, and we meet at 9 a.m. for 90 minutes. And the frontline workers, it's similar to the situation table or CERT, where there's confidentiality, and they're talking about individuals that they're concerned of, they haven't seen, to get interventions happening right away, and to determine if these situations need to be elevated to the CERT table. So it's a collaborative approach. We have 25 different agencies as well. We have bylaw will come, the mental health RCMP will come, community response team, and the frontline workers. So not the management that go to the CERT, but frontline workers. We take statistics, we don't take names, none of that is recorded. And discuss the concerns, including individuals they're working with, and collaborate to create wraparound services. Sometimes this includes right after the meeting going out and trying to find an individual or providing an intervention that day. So often they can divert a situation from needing to go to CERT because they can come up with an intervention that day. And then they'll also keep track of individuals that are on the rise and that they're concerned about, and follow up again in 2 weeks. Okay, and Jody's going to talk about the Wellness Center next.
So one of the biggest challenges that Chilliwack faced was that there was, probably like most cities, there was nowhere for folks to go. Unlike London, they weren't allowed in the parks even. So they were being moved along at 7 a.m. from the streets. They are being moved along from parks on rainy days when everything gets wet. They can't lay their stuff out during the sun a couple days later because they were being constantly just moved. So we started to, mostly because our frontline staff were coming back and bugging us daily about what we needed. And thank you to the city for making this happen too. So we now have a wellness center. It opened last December, so it was a 1-year pilot. And it is open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And folks can come and hang out as long as they want. There's a big room in the back with couches. We have folks that come in at 7 to get a couch, and they sleep for the next 8 hours. And many make statements like they haven't slept this long or this well in decades, some of them. There's food and breakfast served in the morning and some lunch. There's washer and dryer. The only thing we were not able to get into that space were showers, which is really unfortunate, but it would not accommodate, the plumbing would not accommodate. So it is a safe and supportive environment. It's really well staffed with staff as well as peers. So there's a really good combination of support here, trauma-informed and really culturally safe. And then the really important piece, again, was that integrated community piece. So all of our community partners use the Wellness Center. It is and has become like the meeting place. So when someone fails to come to probation and they don't want to breach them, they will be coming to the center to try to find those folks before breaching. We have nurses and some of our health authority programs that come in here and provide the foot care and the wound care and all the stuff like that needs to happen. So it's become like we even have I'll have even lawyers calling me who are looking for their people. And we know where to find them now. It's like, I think that's probably one of the biggest bonuses. They used to be hard to locate, and now they're just there every day. Some of the stats for the Wellness Center. So we see about 2,500 visits a month, really about 200 unique individuals. 70% are men, and 65% of them are between 30 and 50 years old. 30% of the folks using the center are Indigenous, and the community, or the Wellness Center itself, has given out about 60 referrals a month back out to community, whether that's mental health or ICM, some of our health authority, detox, our OAT treatments. And I'm going to, do you want to talk about the OPS and then funding? Yeah. Actually, so the picture on the bottom was our solution to being able to store their items. So we actually have a chain-linked area in the back of one of that room. And there's a check-in and check-out process, and their buggies can actually be locked right to the fence there, and they're completely safe from anybody else being able to take their stuff. And it's really, really provided such a degree of security and safety for those folks to know that all of their earthly belongings are safe. Oh, you want to stay there?
So I'm going to talk about two other things. So the Wellness Center from the city's aspect was a one-stop shop. It had to have the ability to have health services there because there are so many barriers for people experiencing homelessness. It was really important that it could be somewhere where people could come to them. So we have an iHeart team that comes in, an ICM team. PCRS has a part-time nurse that's there. So it is a place where people can come. Income assistance is there on a weekly basis to help people get their income. This is, like Jody alluded to, a 1-year project that currently ends December 1st, so that's very soon. We were able to get funding for a year to make that happen. The challenge is that it was one-time funding with unspent funds from different government departments, and it was so successful and people want to see it happen, but it doesn't fit anyone's funding mandates. So this is a challenge that we're having now, and we're working with our government partners to try to change those mandates because they see how well it's going. They want to keep it going, but they're also trying to make it fit in a mold that it doesn't fit in. So the conversations are ongoing. We're confident it will stay open past December 1st, but likely the look of it will change. So it's a challenge, but we're up for it and hope it keeps the integrity of it going. Lastly, we're going to talk about the OPS. So this is an overdose prevention site that opened in April at the Wellness Center. So there is if you can see that shed room, that is a room where people can use inhalants. They get a limited amount of time in there, and then right next to it's another shed where they can be observed for the next 10 to 15 minutes. The room with the couch is where people can use injectables. And then the other picture is where the staff are to watch. So there's always 3 staff on so that they can observe what's happening, check in on people. To date, there's only been 3 overdoses that people have come back from successfully. So it's gone really well. It's open 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's an average of 3,500 uses per month. And there's also access to drug checking at the site twice a week, every week. And harm reduction supplies are available where the staff are 7 days a week as well. So we just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and we'll answer questions after.
Tried to close it.
I think mine's still open on the side too.
And then how'd you guys get it today?
No, that's hers.
All right, thank you. And now we have our last presentation, which is the Encampments as Catalysts for Innovative Partnerships and Accelerated Housing Solutions. So we have 3 presenters on this one: Ashley Eddy from Homeward Trust Edmonton, Candace Noble from the Bissell Center, and Aidan Inglis from Boyle Street Community Services.
Did you notice the button? Oh, nicely done. Hi, I'm Candace. As was mentioned, I'm the Director of Housing and Outreach at Bissell Center in Edmonton. I just want to say thank you to the moderator for providing us a land acknowledgement this morning before we began. We've had such a beautiful, warm welcome here on Mi'kmaq territory, and we're glad to be here. I also want to acknowledge that Aidan, Ashley, and I come to you from Edmonton, traditionally known as Amiskwaci, Waskagan, Treaty 6 territory. And, we do land acknowledgements in order to remind ourselves of the important act of being intentional in building relationships, acknowledging the people that have come before us, and continuing to work together to co-create a future of two-eyed seeing. And so I just wanted to take a minute to ground ourselves in that before we start to talk about our work. Thanks.
Thanks, Candace. So good morning, everyone. I am really glad to be here, and I think it really says a lot about what's happening in all of our cities, not just Edmonton. If you look at the conference presentation, every single block of time has encampments as a topic. So I know that we're here amongst peers and really trying to figure out how do we tackle this thing together. So looking forward to talking about that. We come from a city that has housed over 16,000 people using Housing First and supportive housing as an evidence-based approach. And in all that success, the tension that we're trying to work through is the encampment situation, the unsheltered homelessness situation is absolutely the hardest it's ever been. It is the hardest it's ever been. We have 700 people on our streets right now, and have lost over 100 of our community members since June. So managing a bit of emotion in this presentation for sure. And if we can leave you with anything today, it's, your cities are not alone. We're struggling. We're all struggling. And hopefully you can learn a bit from what we have done and whether it's what you do want to do or don't want to do. If we can just give you some takeaways and help you figure this out as we are navigating through. So how did we get here as a country, as a city, with the unsheltered issue? When I think about it, I try to think about the layers of the issue. It's not any one problem, despite what media tells you or the most vocal person in your community might tell you. There's no secret that everything has changed. It's not just the unsheltered homelessness situation. We've all gone through a pandemic. We're all going through inflation. We're all going through the stress of turnover and
and trying to work in our organizations when things are changing really rapidly. And so for all of that change, I think the energy and the urgency around encampments is certainly dialed up, if I can put it that way. And it's not always super helpful when we have media sort of, I don't want to say inflaming, but what you hear in the media, what we see immediately as soon as there's some sort of announcement or information out there is, again, sort of a spike in volume and a spike in the intensity. We know for sure that housing markets are tough. Everyone thinks that Edmonton is really affordable, but if you do the math behind it, it's actually not. Really common for one bedrooms to be over $1,500, and of course the cost of utilities and everything that goes with that. And our income support levels leave people with less than $800 a month. So those are very real challenges. Discrimination, we know, as much progress as we've made in all of our communities, that's still very real. So it's not always so easy to just get people housed, as much as we want to do that. Pressures of our city council. We need to be grateful for the pressure of our city council. They have been really, really committed. A lot of change where homelessness might be on the city council agenda once a year. Now it is every single city council meeting. So that attention and that focus has both intensified our challenge, but also helped us in a lot of ways as well. Unsheltered individuals, the most important people who are impacted by the issue, and I think they share our concerns, obviously both for themselves and their day-to-day situation, but they're also seeing that things have gotten harder. There's lots of fear around victimization. There's fear about being moved along and fear about when am I going to be housed so that the situation comes to an end. Partnerships. So this is one of the spaces that is one of the positives that's helping to offset how hard it's been. Candace, Aiden, and I and our colleague Jared from City of Edmonton have actually been working together with each other in this space for over a decade. There are a number of community agencies as well that are supporting it. So all of our Housing First teams, all of our supportive housing operators in Edmonton, there's over 375 staff in that space, and all of those programs are prioritizing unsheltered people. So we're really trying to figure out how do we take the whole system, everything we can, let's throw it at this problem and try and solve it. There's lots happening in the shelter space as well. We've got more housing workers in shelters than we ever have before. So really trying to get everybody to pull in the same direction and tackle this together is where we've been going. Rewinding a little bit. So this is our history. 2007 was Edmonton's first encampment. And it actually was one of the main factors that launched our Housing First program. So our 10-year plan started 2009, but it gave us sort of a platform to figure out how to address the issue and ideally prevent and reduce those in the future. There was lots of work done in between 2017 to 2019, or 2007 to 2019. I'm just giving you a bit of the highlights, but 2019 is where we really saw things getting hard again. So there was lots of effort. We actually had a city bus and would put all the housing outreach workers on it and go to some of these larger scale encampments and try and support people because we knew that closure would have to happen. But let's see if we can get outreach and housing out and make those service offers as quickly as possible. So it's not closure with nothing, it's closure with a housing offer. 2020, that weird time that we all went through, 2019 to 2020. So we had our largest encampment ever, over 400. Well, I've got 350, but it was over 400 people. We had a protest camp in our downtown core. And that was our longest standing large encampment. I guess it was, one of our first approaches to sanctioned encampments, and there was a lot of learning from it. It wasn't a sanctioned encampment, but it was allowed to stay for a certain amount of time, and immediately following, a shelter was open to support the individuals so that as it became closed, they were connected to shelter and most importantly, connected to housing along the way. And the last thing about our current state before I hand it over to Aiden, Our by name list, we've got a really well-established coordinated access system in Edmonton. So over 60 community partners help us identify people. That's outreach. We've got EPS in there. We've got Alberta Health Services, all of our community drop-ins. Our Edmonton Public Library is an awesome location for unsheltered people specifically because they utilize that space. So all of these partners are identifying people to us all day, every day, to let us know that, hey, this is another person and they're outside and they need your housing support. So 718 as of October. And as you can see on the graph on the bottom, homelessness in Edmonton has changed. It has increased, and typically unsheltered is around 20 to 25% of that population, but we've seen it follow a similar trajectory to homelessness overall. Aiden.
So what you'll see here is a map of Edmonton, and the encampments that were tracked and responded to in some way by the city and our outreach teams in 2022. And so Edmonton has a population of over 1 million and is the 5th largest city in Canada, and also has the worst Canadian hockey team at this point. I'm glad I kept that in. What you can see here is that there's a lot of concentration in the central part of Edmonton, right around kind of where the downtown core is, where the river valley is, but there's also a fair amount of spread, and there's camps kind of throughout. And this was last year. I would say at this point there's even more spread than there was has ever been. But what makes, I think, Edmonton particularly challenging is that we have the largest spread of urban parkland in North America. And so a lot of these encampments are in our river valley, in our parkland area. That makes it really difficult to connect with folks on a regular basis. They're at times hard to find, which is obviously intentional by folks so that they don't get moved along, but that also makes it really difficult for outreach workers to locate them. If they get moved, you have to kind of start over again. Sometimes teams are going out just to connect with one individual. That may take an entire morning or afternoon, and you don't know if that person's going to be there or not. So the amount of intensive interactions that has to take place to really work with folks and help provide them the supports they need it is difficult in our city and with the setup in the River Valley. And so that adds another layer of complexity. So here you'll see kind of the numbers. The first one is our encampment-related inquiries since 2019. And so you can see there's obviously been a substantial increase in that, over tripling. And so what that means is that doesn't mean the amount of individual camps. One camp could be called in 10 times by some people. But it does show that there's an increasing demand on the city and agencies to respond to those encampments. And many of those encampments, people are calling them in because they're concerned, obviously, about the individual. Sometimes they're calling in and they're calling in something that isn't even an encampment, but still all of those get tracked and really adds the complexity because usually someone has to get sent out to respond to that, even if it's something that is abandoned or wasn't even a camp at any point. Cleanups obviously make sense that have also increased with the amount of encampment-related inquiries. But then when we get down to the number of individuals that we're seeing in encampments, that the street outreach unique participants, those aren't the folks that we're seeing throughout the entire city. Those numbers are really specific to those folks in like the River Valley areas that I was talking about, those ones that are harder to reach. And so when you have 200 plus folks in kind of hidden throughout a fairly large city in the River Valley, it's pretty difficult when you have maybe teams of approximately 10 folks trying to respond to all of that need and connect folks to housing resources. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It does not include any of the large-scale encampments that are usually above the River Valley bank, where on those green areas, or that we've seen where you sometimes have 20, 30 camps alone, and so this is just those individuals that are really hidden away and that we continue to kind of struggle to connect with on a regular basis. And then lastly on this slide, you'll see our mobile outreach unique participants. So again, those are all unique individuals that are mobile support services bus, which is only a 6-month program that runs during the winter, see and connect with that are often in outlying areas where there aren't shelters or drop-ins or services that they can connect with. And so that is also unfortunately increased dramatically since 2019. And so that those folks are often coming on there for immediate support, casework, housing work, and transportation to shelter or drop-ins. But usually on average, about 40 to 50% of those folks are sleeping outside. So despite these challenges, we've had a tremendous amount of success, which Ashley already spoke about, with over 1,100 housings of unsheltered individuals since 2020. This has been through permanent supportive housing options, intensive case management, and rapid housing options, as well as other work being done by teams. And so this is awesome because it's not just one agency, one group, or even just a couple. There's over 26 community agencies that are involved in this work and over 25 program types that really offer a variety of options to folks to make sure that we're trying to set them up for success. One of the things that was really a game changer that we brought on as a sector over the last few years was a bridge housing option. So a number of sites that allowed us kind of a more immediate, sometimes same day option to get folks from their tent or where they were staying straight into maybe a hotel or often a hotel where they were staffed 24 hours, where meals were provided, where they were safe and had all of those immediate needs met. But more importantly, we were able to then follow up with them on a regular basis rather than try and, locate them in the river valley and really connect with them to long-term housing options. And so, as you can see, over 30, or on average 35% of the individuals that use bridge housing options were previously unsheltered. And so we saw a tremendous amount of collaboration between agencies because one agency may be the one to refer someone to that site, but then as a group, make sure that people are being connected to the proper and appropriate agency to support them out of there. And those aren't long-term stays, but something that is meant to allow someone to kind of stabilize so that we can assess and make sure that we're supporting them to the appropriate resource.
All right. So we have typically as Ashley said, we have a well-established by names list and coordinated access system functioning in Edmonton. We've housed over 1,600 people through the traditional Housing First ICM or rapid rehousing program model. So we have street outreach coordinated access. That's how we have our housing outreach workers participate in getting folks housing ready and locating apartments, taking folks on viewings, all of those things. And then we move on to case management, which runs from about 12 to 18 months. And so that's the typical Housing First program, which I'm sure you're all familiar with here in this room. But we were struggling with folks that were living in encampment to make this model successful for them. So we were losing folks within the time they were added to the BNL, and then by the time a housing outreach worker was assigned to work with them, so we couldn't locate them anymore because they got moved on. Then as an outreach worker was working with them to try and get those housing ready pieces in terms of ID, income, a bank account, those types of things, and we would lose them again as they would get moved along. And so the housing process would take 50 to 60 days as opposed to our typical 30 in our community. And then again, in terms of when we got that person housed, we were losing them again between, a lease signing and then actual move-in and connection to follow up. So there was a lot of challenge in terms of maintaining constant engagement with folks that were sleeping outdoors, and we were trying to figure out how we could approach things a little bit differently for those folks, that demographic. So things that we've done around this population specifically in terms of adapting our service model, we created firstly we created an encampment to housing program that was kind of a collective case management team. So we cross-trained housing outreach workers and follow-up support workers so that they could do both functions, that we didn't have to transfer. We could minimize the transfer from folks from housing outreach worker to follow-up support worker. They were also trained in street outreach. So everybody was doing all the functions across the team so that we could minimize the amount of transfer an individual had to do between workers. And we were able to reduce the loss of contact in doing that. Our city, our municipality has also worked with us to create a scaling, a risk matrix in terms of encampments. And so we work closely with our city and all of our partners around governance of how to maintain. I'm thrown off now with the 2-minute thing. Yeah. Anyway, so we create a risk matrix, and for folks that are in lower risk encampments, in the sense that they don't pose a huge threat to the community, we're able to leave those sites in place for a longer period of time. So again, we reduce the amount of time we lose contact with those folks. And then something recently we just started this year, which I think is really interesting, is we created a subset of the by names list. So we had the by names list. We were looking at the subset of folks that are specifically sleeping outside, and then we decided to take an even more zoomed in look at that demographic. So we identified folks that were had some pre-housing readiness in terms of folks that I already identified as having income, already identified as having identification, and then we were able to create a list of specific individuals that we wanted to assertively outreach. So we created a list of 100 people and assembled a team that would specifically target those individuals, and it's been very successful in having the kind of reverse approach of where we go to people specifically as opposed to doing it the other way around. We've housed, we assembled our team in May, we started the work in June, and we've housed about 75 people out of encampments since then. So it's been pretty good. We, like Ashley said, we provide the services for encampment residents out of our public libraries in the form of housing workshops, and provide access to the full spectrum. And another innovative thing we did this year was creating an outreach team within our city center mall. So the core, which I'm sure you're all familiar with wherever you live, is densely populated with folks that are sleeping outdoors. And so there was a mall in our core that was really struggling. And so we added some outreach workers to that space in order to be able to provide access to services for folks that are staying there. And so, yeah, we don't have all the answers. So in terms of moving forward, we are participating in action research program ARCH with the federal government around folks sleeping outdoors. We are enrolling other system partners to increase our prevention efforts, and looking at ways to adapt our program model to support recovery from the experience of homelessness, and the tension between, client choice and client-driven, and the idea of and harm reduction, and the idea of recovery in the sense of a holistic. And then in terms of maintaining urgency, I think it's really challenging. Retention has been hard on all of us throughout the pandemic, incredibly hard. Our folks are tired, and with the pressures that Aidan talked about, increasing pressures in terms of the media and council and the visibility of houselessness right now, I think we have to be very careful to manage expectations of what we can and cannot do as outreach workers and housing workers. I sit around a lot of tables, and the answer is often, I'll give you some more outreach workers, Candace, and then we can make a dent in this unhoused population. No, I need some systemic change. The outreach workers can't do all these things on their own. So, yeah, we have to keep doing that work together. Still lots left to learn. And that's it.
Great, thank you so much. Looks like we have about 20 minutes left for some questions. I believe there's a microphone there if people would like to ask anything of our presenters.
Okay, I got one. Have any of you thought about maybe establishing a team, and this could be of volunteers, who will coordinate the media to be more positive and more educational with the public, and to counteract anything that's negatively coming out of the media.
We're actually working on a project with the city of Edmonton around, we're creating a video. So a videographer has been following around a bunch of our outreach workers, getting consent from some folks that are living in encampments. I don't think this is on. And we've been trying to show the process of what are the steps involved to getting somebody housed from an encampment, what are the barriers around that, and share people's experiences around losing their belongings, not having someone to watch their camp while they go on viewings, and those types of pieces. So we're working with our city to create some promotional materials that hopefully will give people some insight into the actual experience of living outdoors and trying to leave it.
I'm thinking of even going beyond that and giving people information about why it's in their best interest to support the changes that are needed, instead of a trickle-down theory that we've been working, our governments particularly have been working under, and our population has sort of adopted without thinking, triple up that if these people are housed, these are going to help solve your problems of affordability. Because, at this level, right now what's happening across the country, we all know, those of us who are probably, we would call ourselves middle class, we struggle with housing. And we know, young people aren't getting into it, old people are house rich but cash poor, can't move out because there's nothing there. So there's a need for, that type of education that needs to go out all the time. People need to be drummed into it as to this is in your best interest to support these initiatives.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, Louis Franciscotti, I'm an emergency physician from Edmonton. I just want to thank you for the knowledge you shared, but I want to point out some things. You said there's, on your by name list, 713 people. We've got a project running out of the emergency department where we ask patients experiencing homelessness if they want a chance to get onto permanent housing. And if they do, we built actual buildings for them. And 70% of our clients are not on the by name list. So just to warn you, I think that by name list probably underrepresents. And for those of you going back to your community, reach out to your emergency physicians, because these patients all present in the emergency department once or twice a day. That's when they're at their most vulnerable. They have to leave behind their possessions, go through security, meet a cranky triage nurse, and wait in the emergency room for 10 hours. And so that's when you ask them, do you want to go to housing? And if they say yes, then what we do is our social worker calls a cab. If we have a bed, we send them and give them all the wraparound services right then and there and move them on to permanent supportive housing. So we've been doing it for 6 months. We're about to open our 36th bed. We're going to 108 beds. Patients stay about 52 days. And it's about, right now, a 50% success rate. That's because we accept everyone. They can do drugs on the premises. We watch them. But they're presenting daily to you. And so it would be nice that a conference like this passes a resolution that says no patient that's in a healthcare facility that's homeless is discharged back into homelessness.
Here, here.
So just reach out to your local emergency department and say, hey, can we partner with you? Because these patients present on a daily basis, and it causes great moral distress to the doctors, nurses, and social workers that give them $3,000 worth of care and then put them right back out on the street.
The City of London right now, that health and homelessness summit that we went through, it is collectively engaging health with homelessness, understanding that it is a multifaceted concern and challenge. In the City of London, that is exactly what has happened. ERs and emergency services are, ambulance, fire, everyone is tied up with many hours of addressing concerns with homelessness that really should be redirected into a better response from upper level and spread across communities. So that's what the City of London's working on right now. It's a great idea.
And I can speak to what's happening in Chilliwack. So we will be getting 22 complex care beds in 2024. But currently people in hospital are trying to be released to shelter beds. But we have 185 shelter beds for 400 people. It's not working. So I hear what you're saying.
Absolutely.
One of the other Chilliwack initiatives that just started was a peer, it's a pilot project. And we have 4 peers in the emergency room at the Chilliwack Hospital now. They were chosen beautifully. They're just 4 incredible humans. And they're covering 7 days a week, about 15 hours a day between the 4 of them. And they are connected to all the tables and connected to all of us. And we can call them and say, hey, we're bringing someone over. And they're literally at the door waiting to meet them. And they will walk them through their next 8 hours in emerge or whatever that might look like, as well as the release afterwards. So some creative, out of the box. And our health authority emergencies at our table. Yeah, thank you for that. Super. I know it's all connected. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, there's not 700 people on our BNL. 700 people identify as sleeping outdoors. There's way more on the BNL. Yes.
But I love the idea of let's just not let anybody out of anywhere until we've offered housing.
Yes. We're all for that.
This guy's at the mic.
Hi, my name is Wes Smith. I'm a RUH worker here in Halifax. The question is for the first presenter, Debbie. Can you talk a little bit about how you've done your pilot program, and it sounds like you had a few years since that inception. Can you talk a little bit about how what kind of metrics you're using to measure the success of the program? Kind of like the evaluation process of that. Are you like going out and surveying folks? Yeah, if you can just share a little bit about that. Thanks.
I don't know if this is working, but I'll try. Yes, thanks, Wes. We use a variety of metrics. Our outreach services is an outside agency that we contract, so they have their own internal metrics that is very people-oriented metrics where they consistently do engagement and surveys. They keep numbers on people statistics. But the city team keeps consistent data on physical metrics, how many encampments, where they're located, what we've provided for services, the amount of garbage, the amount of needles, both issued and retrieved in our sharp collection. Those sorts of things are all monitored and kept. We also have housing records because we use HIFIS. Our individuals are identified through outreach on HIFIS, so they're very people-centric and they follow their housing paths. Paper readiness, what they need for supportive housing, et cetera, et cetera. We do use VI SPDAT still. That is our gauge for acuity. We have all kinds of numbers coming from our collaboration from our other outside agencies. Was there something specific you were looking for as to determine whether we take it or not?
No, just mostly curiosity, and I know there's always sometimes having to wait. You have some data coming from the nonprofit side versus the city side, and just how that is kind of weighted and taken into consideration.
The absolute convenience of directly funding our outreach team to be part of our team. We get in the moment response numbers. They're consistently feeding into the whole of CIR to give us our stats and to keep up with what we see, both in trends and needs out in community.
Good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have one for Debbie.
Yes.
There's someone at the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there's a line.
Oh, geez.
Oh, I didn't see.
So you all saw that, right? That's why these guys get taller and taller. Well, thank you for all the presenters. I have more of a comment than a question. yesterday during the keynote with Minister Fraser, made a great speech and great and inspirational things. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed that I didn't hear him say anything about the right to housing. Because I feel like if this government can't say it, then how do they commit to it? Yeah. And I see all these local actors, civil servants, city officials, we're all trying to manage homelessness. Because to be honest, without help and support from the federal and provincial government, we can't end it. And I think that there's real power if there's consensus amongst us all, or a standard on how we want to address homelessness, and that's called the right to housing. Yesterday, Mayor Savage made mention of a protocol on encampments. It's called the Municipal Engagement Guidance. It was made by the National Working Group on Homeless Encampments, a really multi-stakeholder table of amazing people that said, we have to find a way to have a national consensus standard on how to address encampments through a right to housing approach. I do have some copies if anybody wants to read it, but I just wanted to make that comment because if we are going to address this crisis, we have to first recognize it's a human rights crisis. And we have to put that to the federal and the provincial government because they're the ones that made that commitment. And so they expect
100%.
us to put work into doing it. All the resources have to be there.
100%, thank you.
Hi. Oh my God, this is tall. Okay, hi. I'm Kian from York Region, Supervisor of Outreach Services. My question is actually for the Community Informed Response section, because for those that might not be aware, given this is a countrywide effort, in Ontario, Justice Valente in January ruled that encampments are unable to be dismantled unless a safe and appropriate bed is provided. So I'm just wondering, I was looking at your safety protocols for encampments, and it mentioned encampments cannot be around riverbeds or they had to be in specific locations. I was wondering if that ruling impacts in any way the kind of protocols that are set.
No, we are aware of that as well, and that is why we shifted to permit encampments and support encampments in the city. But we added an additional safety protocol for actually the people who are residing in the encampments. We have a major river that runs through our city and have unfortunately experienced encampments being flooded out in floodplains because they were unaware they were on a floodplain. Encampments being swept up when the river swells, those sorts of things. So the safety is because we are permitting the encampments, we are encouraging people to remain safe. And that's also to protect other encampments that are existing there. So yes, we do follow the encampment protocols, but we added a safety lens for the health and safety of the occupants. You're very welcome.
So I just wanted to obviously thank you guys for your human rights approach to the encampments. I love that you're allowing the encampments. I as we know, it's a human right. We know that justice rules that way. We know that in many cities, including my own, some groups are looking at ways to criminalize homelessness by putting in no panhandling laws and no outdoor fires and no unsafe camping. And so there's that risk there of criminalizing that piece. But then also when I heard the doctor, and I think it came from the best place in his heart to say, we can't release people from hospital into homelessness. My concern comes from my background. I used to work with the folks in housing who are developmentally disabled, and we learned a lot about the deinstitutionalization. So I think we all have to keep an eye to that we could go to that pendulum swing of we're going to just round people up and put them in these housing situations. It's like forced housing. And really that's where we came from. A lot of the folks that we are serving they have the freedom, and we're allowing them the freedom to choose to be a little bit homeless and choose to be, so we have to be careful about that sort of forced housing mentality, because we come from a horrible past where people were rounded up and lobotomized. So, and that's not an exaggeration.
Thank you.
I believe my colleague, Dr. Laura has a question, but can't get to the mic, so I just wanted to give you space for your question.
Oh, that was nice. Yeah, well, I did want to ask a question, but I don't think Stephen. Everybody you David Alston, master facilitator, can read my face. Yeah, my question is for the first presentation from London. I've heard a little bit about your approach as a municipality, and so it was great to hear about it in more detail. I'm wondering in terms of the relationship between this really intensive services first approach, right? And this recognition that we can't house folks. We don't have the shelter spaces, we don't have the housing, right? And some of the bylaws that are still on the books in terms of neo-vagrancy style bylaws, and sort of how you manage, my understanding is those bylaws are still on the books and they haven't been repealed, so I'm wondering how you manage the conflict. And this comes from working in Waterloo region, where I think often there is that tension between this, real desire and real motivation for a services first approach, as well as the existence of bylaws that, residents maybe we want you to enforce these bylaws, right? Or some councillors, depending on their relationship to the issue, may also come to you and say, why are we permitting this with bylaws on the books?
Well, first and foremost, you invite them to your team. So we have bylaw right on our team in CIR. And you are correct. We are currently turning a blind eye to our parks bylaw, which prohibits anyone to be in the park beyond 10 p.m. But the federal human rights movement and our current state in the City of London trumps that bylaw currently. We really don't have shelter space or anything appropriate for individuals to reside in. And unfortunately, we have experienced what it is that moving people along does to them, the trauma it causes, and it only makes for more service work. If you really break it down, it is only causing more service industry work. If you support an individual, they are more likely, especially if you leave them where they're at, more likely to engage with you, trust you, and be able to have the capacity to work towards their housing. You're welcome.
I did have a question on my own. Also from the context of Waterloo, I'm working with a bunch of lived experts to try and build a human rights-based approach for the region of Waterloo. And one of the biggest barriers we constantly keep running into is that health and safety frameworks, fire safety frameworks are really restrictive and don't, you have all these gaps, and then people end up in situations that are very unsafe. It's too unsafe to have a fire in your tent, so freeze to death kind of situation. And so I'm wondering how any of you all navigate that tension with those departments, and if you have found any ways to help build more dialogue so that we can start exploring a fuller picture of health and safety beyond just within the current structures.
We created some pilot. The city of Edmonton has done some prototyping in the last year, and one of the prototype pieces was around fire prevention, fire safety. It's freaking cold in Edmonton, and we just had somebody pass away already, and it's not even that cold yet. Yeah, 4 people over the weekend, but 2 related to encampment fires. So it's very real for us in Edmonton. So we did some prototyping this past year around with fire prevention services around fire safety. So we produced some materials around how to have a fire in your encampment safely, talking about 2 entrances, where to have it, talked about having sandboxes and shovels at hotspot locations, those types of things. Bissell Center purchased $10,000 worth of fire extinguishers, and we distributed those at our outreach efforts. So yeah, it's really real for us. But the tension is, again, there's a bylaw that says that you can't have an open fire like that, and so it's challenging for fire rescue services to participate in those things and provide us support with those materials. So they participated, gave us guidance, help us make the materials, the trainings, which we delivered to outreach workers and peers and those types of things, but they're not the face of it. So it's a challenge, challenging for sure.
It's different in London. Fires are still prohibited in encampments, and it is because of the serious injury and deaths we've seen in the City of London from fire. What we have done is overload our outreach teams with fire safety supplies. We actually hand out tarps, extra blankets, hot pots. We're trying to come up. We have battery operated heating sources, but those don't last forever. Batteries are hard to come by when you're in an encampment, but we are constantly looking for alternatives so there's not that safety risk.
Okay, Debbie, just
Yeah.
one quick question.
Okay.
You have almost like a code of conduct in your camps, which is interesting. And so if someone, just as an example, is chronically violent and you move them on, then how do you, they're just gonna go to another camp, aren't they?
Yes. Like all humans, sometimes it's relationships that
Yeah.
cause those conflicts. So maybe it's somebody else at the camp that is triggering
Okay.
or causing the escalation. But the team monitors everyone. So we would then engage with them at their next location if it became a problem. So keep in mind, all of those things we approach on, we discuss, we look for compliance, and then if it doesn't happen, then that's when we ask them to relocate and we assist them to relocate. And then when we do that, we know where they've relocated to watch for that pattern.
Good, okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Hi,
I'm
you're the
Jackie
little
Smith.
person.
This is Daphne, my daughter. I'm a city councillor in Quebec City, and I have absolutely zero experience in homelessness. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and being here and asking questions, because I have a lot of files, and this has been wonderful to have a crash course in the sources and solutions of homelessness. And I just want to say that you're not alone, and thank you so much for everything you do. I know that you're exhausted and you're working really hard, and you're going through trauma.
And thank you for being here. I wish that our city councillors were here.
But it's we're all in this together, and don't give up, everyone.
Thank you. We can probably hear you.
Talks about the wellness shelters, and I know when I, kind of do research with some of the people that are sleeping around, that's one of the things that they lack is, access to toilets, to water, to showers, to clean their clothes. So when I saw the wellness center, and then even to have a place where they can, log their things, the few things that they have. You guys were saying that, well, it's not really something that people are funding, or if it does come back, it might look differently. So what are the challenges, and what does that mean going forward? How will it look in the future?
So currently, there we do have funding from the Health Authority, from BC Housing, Reaching Home funded part of it. And it's funded by a model that went through the community that we had consultation on with lived experience and with our Indigenous partners in our community to make sure we were hitting what people wanted. What we've heard from those partners is that what we're doing doesn't fit in their mandates. So while it's great and it's awesome and running really well and it has all these fantastic statistics, it doesn't fit in their current mandates. So it means that they can't fund it the way it is.
And unless it's called a shelter or folks are sleeping there, it's beds, it's about beds. So BC Housing doesn't want to fund, say, if there's not a shelter attached to it, or if we don't open up 24 hours to sleep.
Space or stuff that we'll be
Right. So it is a little bit, I think, of the passing of the buck between the health authority and the housing authorities, and trying to come together to see that this is everybody's issue and it's everybody's solution. But right now it's so that's the change that we'll see will be that it'll become a shelter overnight as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes down to funding structure, right? So right now there's a funding structure in place that supports people where they're at. with the number of staff needed, because let's be honest, we are in a drug crisis, we're in a mental health crisis, we're in a housing crisis, and we see a lot of incidents that happen, and you can't cut back on staffing. And that is one of the pushes that we're seeing, is that maybe there shouldn't be so many staff on site, and you can't cut back on that. It's a necessity to have people there, and people that. The other thing that we didn't really get into in our conversation is that we have a lot of people with lived experience of homelessness and substance use that work there. And so much of the work that's done there is relational. So the referrals that are happening are from the relationships that are naturally happening there, because people feel comfortable, they're feeling welcome, they're getting what they need, they're sleeping during the day. No one will accept that that's part of the shelter, that people are coming and sleeping during the day. Like, it happens. All those red couches you saw in the picture, people are sleeping there. But that's not an accepted form of shelter. And so these personal relationships that have developed and these referrals, people have gone into treatment, people have gone into detox, and we have wait lists in BC. Like, you can't just do that, but it's personal relationships, talking to people to get people in. And I'm a municipal employee, but I'm there 2 or 3 times a week. I have relationships with all the staff there because they're phenomenal people doing the hard work. I sit behind a desk every day. I'm not out there on the street with everyone else. Like, it's giving me goosebumps. Sorry, I'm very passionate about it. It's become my baby.
For Indigenous scientists, and they were saying that BC Housing wants to give them money, and they're like, well, we're not going to do a shelter when we do it. We're going to, because, the daytime is the best time to reach that, to kind of build those relationships, because a lot of people are isolated. There's a lot of different emotional things. So.
That's not the case for us. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Over time.
Okay. Are you guys open to staying?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do outreach in Kitchener, and it's volunteer-based. So you're saying that there isn't enough funding and stuff like that for shelters, but there's so much funding for the research, right? At what point are we going to stop looking or stop trying and just get it done? Right?
Yes.
We have the money.